Welcome to the Mullin Museum.
Wow.
Well, let's see.
Now this is really a car?
This is actually a bronze of a Bugatti Type 35, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's René Dreyfus, the famous French
What
racer.
year would this be approximately?
35, probably late 20s, early 30s.
I'll be
You're going
darned.
to see the real ones here, though.
Oh, yeah.
This is Alex Gillen. This is Ed
Nice to meet you.
Iskenderian.
Alex
Isky.
Nice to
Gibbon?
meet you. Yes, nice to meet you.
Well, this is the famous campfather, Ed Iskenderian. It's our pleasure. When I
Thank
met
you.
you last year, you said you'd like to come to this museum.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is a long time after Otis Chandler had already left. He had passed away, and Mr. Peter Mullin bought the building and brought his collection of Bugattis, Delahayes, Delahages, moved it to here.
Uh-huh.
And that's when I asked you if you knew anything about the Knight double sleeve valve engine. You're the only person I ever met that said, yeah. Your uncle had either a Stearns Knight or Willis Knight, I think.
Oh,
told
yeah,
me.
the Willis Knight?
Yeah, and you knew the motor. Sleeve
Yeah.
valve engine. Yeah, we got a whole bunch of cars with
Two
sleeve valve
sleeves.
engines.
Two
Hey,
sleeves.
Jim Robertson. Here's another one of our docents. Meet the campfather, Ed
How
Iskenderian.
you do?
Check.
Good to see you, Jim.
Good to see you.
More.
I've got a favor to ask.
Uh-huh.
Uh-oh.
This is a magazine that I had in high school, and I
Oh,
got
my.
so much trouble reading Hot Rod magazine in high school. The
Yeah.
big thing about this magazine, there's a full-page ad for Iskenderian cans.
Yeah.
Ed, I'd like to ask you, if you would, please sign
Oh, yeah.
the ad. And the crazy thing about this is at the bottom of his ads, he used to have, for 25 cents, send in for a black and white picture of the car and Ed and everything. I've still got that picture, but don't know
I'll
where it
be-
is.
Oh, it's too
I'll be
bad. That's
As soon
yeah.
as I found out he was going to be
Yeah.
here, I started going through my archives.
I'll be darned.
I thank you very much for
Oh, you're
making
welcome.
it this long and,
You're welcome.
and everything you did for hot rodding.
Thank you.
Would you guys like to start to go through the museum?
Now we're going to see the cars.
Now we're going to see some cars. We'll come.
And
And
by the
whatever.
way, you do have a Willis Knight that's apart?
No, I don't. But when you mentioned that, I think it was your uncle did. We have so many Voissons here, and Gabriel Voisson, a French car builder, chose the Willys double sleeve valve engine for his cars. Well,
And you know, Winfield said that the British made a single sleeve that rotated a little in the Bristol Centauris.
it was called a.
And he
Burt-
said that engine was just as powerful as our Pratt Whitney radial
Oh,
engine.
really? And that was the Burt McCullum engine. Burt McCullum made that single.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
who the
single
Englishman
sleeve. That
was
was
that
English.
designed it?
Yeah, Burt McCullum. But
Wow, I'm glad you told me that.
yeah,
I
Charles-
don't know who designed it.
well, I think he just
Boy.
borrowed from Charles Yale Knight.
And
who
they
did the
called
Knight.
him in the Beaufort bomber, they called them Whispering Death. They were so
They
quiet.
were quiet, and
No valve noise.
in the advertising, they call it the Silent Night. That's what
Oh,
they
yeah,
early on.
that's right.
'Cause they come out early. But you're in. This used to be the Otis Chandler Museum. It's now the Peter Mullin Museum,
Yeah.
and it's all an Art Deco museum. So right now, if you look around, this represents the Paris Auto Salon of the
Wow.
20s, and you're going to see some fabulous cars here. And this is actually
What
three
is that?
Citroens. These are Citroens.
Oh,
But if-
Citroen.
But if you look, it looks like a Model A because
Yeah.
Andre Citroen liked Henry Ford, knew him, visited
Oh,
Highland
is that
Park.
really?
This looks like, if you
Oh, I
look, like a
didn't know
Model
that.
T almost.
They were friends, huh?
They are French, Citroens. And
Be darned.
Andre Citroen made gears. That's why the logo is a chevron to represent helical gears.
Yeah.
Now this looks like a Model T front end, but it's not. This is 1923 Citroen. And he basically started assembly line manufacture in France.
Oh, yeah.
And they were building 12,000 cars a year. Now in 1923, Henry Ford built 2.3 million cars, so little difference. But
Wow.
for France, that was a big. This one was the Traction Avant when they started the first front-wheel drive cars that were practical.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that was is Andre Citroen. They started to build front-wheel drive cars, so they could lower it down. See how it almost looks like a 34
yeah.
Ford.
Yeah.
Get that look. And when we bring people to the museum, we talk about the coach builders, so the N-spec cars. So you would go in, these are two Hispano-Suizas. You'd go into the Paris Auto Salon and choose
I'll
a
be
chassis
darned.
builder.
This is a elegant? No.
No, these are all French. So this is a
French.
Hispano-Suiza. That's a Hispano-Suiza with a Labradette body. This is a Hispano-Suiza.
I wonder if the French did this wooden sides.
Yeah, they did this in
before
France.
us.
You know,
Before us,
I don't know. They probably were using it because Labradette, who built this car, they started building buggies.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a dog cart from 1880s. And this is where a rich guy would keep his dogs in back. He'd have his groomsmen with his shotguns. And it'd be have a chauffeur. Chauffeur is in the French cheval for horse, and take him out on his estate and let the dogs out. And they built these in the 1880s. And when cars started coming in, they changed to building bodies. Now look at the wooden body on this Hispano-Suiza.
All wood?
Yeah, this is actually a wooden body. The chassis is a Hispano-Suiza 6-cylinder, but is this beautiful? Mm-hmm. And Labradette built this body, and I think for this car, this might have just been one of the bodies built for this chassis that the lady used it in the summer, and then in the winter had it, you know, you take it back to your carriage house and they might put a different body on it. These cars were expensive. You might spend $15,000, $18,000 for the chassis, which today would be like $250,000. Then another $8,000 or $10,000 for the body. You might wait a year to get your car. And so Citroen had a different idea. He says, I want to be like Ford. You come into my showroom, you see a car, you pay for it, drive it home. So, but these are all in spec. So as we kind of move along through here, we'll see a Peugeot Darlamart.
What is this? Did you say a Delahaye?
No, we're going to see it. This is a Peugeot, and it's the model.
This is a Peugeot?
Yeah, it's a
This is a Peugeot?
Yep.
Wow.
It's called the Darlamart. And so is this coach?
What year do you think that would be?
This is a 37.
Wow.
This is a 4-cylinder engine. Most of these were 4- and 6-cylinder engine.
Yeah.
Because they made that was an elegant engine in Europe in the teens and 20s, 6 cylinders, you know. But they made 8 cylinders, but this was an early car to have faired-in headlights. Mm-hmm. And look at the windshield wipers. I've never seen a car with windshield wipers in the convertible top.
Oh, yeah.
You put the top down, you don't need the wipers.
Oh, I see.
But very stylish.
Yeah.
And you know, you had American, like these Hispano-Suizas. The Hispano-Suiza was Harley Earl's favorite car. Edsel Ford owned a Hispano-Suiza. So when you look at the big Lincolns, you can see where he got his ideas. This car was an American in Paris in the movie, 1948.
Oh, yeah.
And it's that big Delage. It's a D8 120.
Wow.
Beautiful car in the movies. And you see Mr. Mullin has the best of the best. This 8-cylinder car. And it's unusual that I've seen most French cars, they didn't, you know, you saw Duesenberg use this external exhaust, but most French cars I don't think did. So this was a little different.
Yeah.
But a beautiful car. This is a Delahaye, but it started out as a race car. And I don't know if the name Lucy Shell means anything, but in the 30s, an American millionairess who lived in Paris loved racing, which is unusual. A lady loved racing, and she created her own racing team, Écurie Blue, the blue team. And you know that she had Delahaye built 4. This is 12-cylinder car. Delahaye only made 8 12-cylinder cars in their whole production, and Mr. Mullin has 6 of the 8. And you're seeing a big chunk of them right here. As we roll through, this is considered one of the most aerodynamic cars in the world, the Talbot Lago. This is the Talbot Lago.
Oh, yeah, that's the Talbot Lago, yeah.
You might
I
have seen.
understand if you just buy a Talgo, but without Lago, you get a regular 6-cylinder engine, but you buy the Lago head, made in Italy.
Yeah, well, this is actually, Lago is Italian, but he made these in France, and this is a supercharged 6-cylinder.
Wow.
And it's got, so this is called the teardrop, and it's a Talbot Lago T150 Supersport SS.
Well,
and
we were kids before the war, and we saw one of these for the first time at Ernie McAfee was the caretaker of the museum in Hollywood. Don Lee.
Don Lee Cadillac.
Yeah. And
He's
his
a famous
son had this museum, and we saw one of these for the first time.
Well, and I was reading the book, and didn't he have a Bugatti, Don Lee's kid, up at El Mirage and cracked it up? Or
I
think
heard
I read
about
that.
it.
Yeah.
And the aluminum wheels broke.
Yeah, and you will see all kinds of those famous Bugatti racing wheels that Ettore Bugatti built. This one actually has a Wilson pre-select. You remember the pre-select transmissions? If you're racing, shift it in the gear, get in the corner, tap the clutch. Yeah. Most of these have pre-selectors, either Wilsons, and the other has Cotals.
Wow.
Here's a this is another Delahaye right here. This baby here was actually found in a chicken coop in India. A lot of these was owned by a Maharaja. Didn't look like this. It didn't look like this.
Oh, it was that needed restoration, huh?
Oh yeah, and the original guy, somebody along the line had changed the headlights and done a bunch.
Oh.
You know, at one point these were just old cars, quite honestly, you know.
Yeah.
But Mr. Mullin, they rescued this car and it is gorgeous.
Wow, what's his business?
He actually was in the financial products. He grew up in Alhambra, a big Irish family, bunch of brothers. And he went to art school and he realized, I'm not going to make probably a great living as an artist. So he started selling insurance door to door, and he finally sold his company, created a company, sold it I think to Prudential, and then he went on to other financial things, and he did quite well. And this is just a piece of his collection. It's about a third that we see here. And this is a Fagonian flashy body. You start to see that big rounded, you know, the compound curve, and that's Joseph Fagoni. Did some beautiful, you know, pre-World War II. Once World War II got around in Europe, that was the end. You know, once the Nazis went into France, everything changed. And so they had to actually, because they had to actually hide the car parts so they weren't stolen. People like Bugatti buried some of the cars and some of the parts.
I see, yeah.
The Nazis took over factories to make, you know, whatever they wanted, munitions and things.
Oh, yeah.
So that kind of destroyed the car thing the great cars kind of stopped at that point.
Yeah,
That was a big problem. Now here's a Delahaye that has quite the story.
Wow, you've got all the different ones.
This is amazing. Well, this is a one-off 1939 called the World's Fair car. So for 1939, they knew war was coming in Europe, but it hadn't really started, hadn't taken over when Delahaye built this car to be featured in the 1939 World's Fair in New York City.
Yeah.
So they built the car. They were putting a 12-cylinder engine. This is one of the very few Delahaye 12 cylinders, and the motor wasn't done in time for the World's Fair. So the motor was still being built in France, but they had to put the car on the boat. Everything was by boat. So they put this car on the boat, and it showed up for the World's Fair, but before they could ship the motor, the Nazis had overrun Belgium and France. And so,
when did the motor ever get back to the car?
Well, this is part of the story. So they lost the motor, supposedly, and it was one of only 8 12-cylinder motors ever built. Remember, Mr. Mullin owns 6 of the 8 that exist today. So this car came to the World's Fair. It obviously looked beautiful. You didn't have to open the hood to enjoy the car. But after the World's Fair was done, they couldn't ship it back to France because it was occupied, so they sent this thing, put it into customs warehouse. It sat there until like 1945 or 6, after the war. Delahaye was in no position to want it back, quite honestly. So the story goes, so they basically sold the car without a motor. It was shipped to California, and I think it was Don Lee put in I think it was a 47 or 48 Cadillac flathead V8, which was a good motor. Yeah, a good motor.
See.
So he did that. They tried to sell it to Clark Gable. They thought a movie star would want it. Clark Gable said, I would never drive in this thing. So they then tried to sell it to whoever would buy it. Some guy in New York bought it, drove it back. It was shipped to Hawaii to some military guy. It bounced around, and then it was missing. This car was supposedly in Fresno, and they said, you're kidding. He said, nope, it's sitting behind a tow truck driver's barn in Fresno. And his kids were using it as a fort, sliding down the fenders and, you know, made a little playhouse out of it.
Yeah.
And of course, Mr. Mullin and Mr. Hall said, hey, we would love to buy this car. And the guy says, yeah, but my kids need a Ford. He says, we will give them a beautiful Ford. But they bought the car and they restored it. And while they were restoring it, they got a call from Germany and said, we've found a Delahaye 12-cylinder motor. Here's the number. And it was the number that was supposed to be in this car.
Oh,
so they're now reunited. This car,
V12?
V12. I have been told by someone who's driven this car that it doesn't get driven enough, and it's a hybrid racing engine, so when you start it up, it's a little rough.
Oh, yeah.
But beautiful car. Here's one of my favorites, the Knight double sleeve valve engine. We're going to see several Voissons.
It's a 3-valve engine?
This is a sleeve valve, yep.
Oh, sleeve valve.
Double sleeve valve.
Oh yeah.
Yep, double sleeve. So it was the Knight engine, just like the Willys Knight. Charles E.L. Knight, the story I've read, had a Knox, a 1901 or 2 Knox.
The French didn't invent that engine.
No,
the Knight.
The Americans did in that.
I see.
And so, but the Americans were a little slow to pay for the pattern.
Yeah.
And so it was actually Daimler in Coventry, England, saw the value, paid for the pattern, and all kinds of European cars had Knight sleeve engine for a little bit.
Oh yeah.
But Gabriel Voisin loved this engine. He hated noise, and as you know, they were very quiet. They smoked a lot.
My uncle had one. He made it into a truck, and we wasn't there one day, and I tried to start it, and I gave up.
Oh, really?
And I stood back. I saw it vibrating. Well, it is running.
It's running.
Well,
Was it smoking too? They used to smoke. I've heard.
Yeah.
It was pretty smoky. And the more they ran, the more they carboned up, the less they smoked. 'Cause they ran better.
Yeah, the ports were good size, and they climbed up with carbon so accurate and so square and so perfect, and that slowed them down. But if you didn't know it, you could just pull a screwdriver and break that carbon out. But
It could get, well, Gabriel Voisin, either by mistake or figured out, because these were, the Knight double sleeve valve engine was not considered a super high horsepower motor, but he basically found that it was a hemispherical combustion chamber because it was sleeve valve. And what he found is he must have either lowered the piston pin or something, but he got the compression up to 8-to-1.
Oh, yeah.
And he found it didn't detonate because there were no poppet valves, there were no hot spots.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how he got some horsepower out of these and made some race cars with the Knight's double sleeve valve engine. This particular car is one of two that exist in the world, the C27, the Type 27. Mr. Mullin owns both of them, both of Voisins, but this one is a Fagoni body, and it was owned by the Shah of Iran. So Shah Reza had this built.
yeah.
But this is a gorgeous car, and you've got your, basically your fancy upholstery. Fancy upholstery, and this is ostrich.
This is really ostrich leather?
Yeah, that's ostrich. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Back then they
Strong leather.
used the real thing. Here's 3 Voisins in a row, and there's 4, and we have 2 more upstairs. This could be the biggest Voisin collection in the world. Most of them were scrapped during World War II because Gabriel Voisin made his cars out of aluminum.
Yeah.
And that's why he made airplanes first. And that's why he had these struts. If you look, they're made like an airfoil.
yeah.
And if you notice, he put the motor meter up where you could read it.
Oh, yeah.
Big windows. You see there's no window frames, no. He said it's a waste of time and waste of metal to add all kinds of chrome and things. He wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And he's
And
the
what
only.
make is this one?
This is a Voisin.
A what?
A Voisin, V-O-I-S-I-N, Gabriel Voisin. And look, it's like airplane windows. He made airplanes during World War I. Airplane seats.
Oh, yeah.
And he's the only car maker I've seen that used piano hinges. Because in an airplane, you don't want your doors opening.
Yeah.
On a windshield wipers, they're like an airplane, but he only has one motor with linkage because he doesn't want to waste any weight.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, he was a very smart guy.
Man.
And here you'll see these 2 cars have 3 big boxes on them. That's where you had an ice bunker, tool chest, and your stuff, and that was for weight control. He made cars relatively low, underslung.
That's right. Yeah.
And he basically, going through the Alps, you could adjust your weight and bias.
What is your name?
Chuck.
Chuck
Reagan.
Reagan.
Yep.
Like the president's name?
Pretty close. Yeah, we're both from County Cork,
Chuck Reagan.
Ireland.
Man, how long have you been doing this?
I did this about a year and a half, and then it's been closed for a year. So.
Oh, it's been closed for a year.
Yeah, because of COVID, because of the pandemic. So.
And just now opening
Just
again?
reopening, yeah.
Today?
No, it opened a couple weeks ago, but you're the first one that's come in here as a guest of the Mullin. Because they respect you and they appreciate you.
Oh, thank you very much.
So now we're going to look at the ultimate barn find. Look at, this is only a small part.
Oh, yeah.
A small part of a collection.
And found.
Yeah, the Schlump brothers collected these cars in France, in the Alsace area, and everything went good. They loved cars, they had a textile mill, and they were doing well buying cars until they stopped paying their employees, and they stopped paying taxes to France, and that never works out real good. So there was a whole big legal problem, and the Schlump brothers escaped to Switzerland. They took off and left everything. In fact, the current National French Museum is now, the wife died, they sold these cars. Now, Mr. Mullin got a call, because when you see a collection like this, there's only a few people in the world that are going to get the phone call. And you look at the different names, like the Ventoux, that looks like kind of your suicide door coupe. The Galibier is interesting, because this one, you open the door and you reach in, it's almost like the pickup truck, they both open. So this back opens kind of like a crew cab. This is in the 1930s.
Wait a minute. Well, besides this door opening, what happened?
This door would open this way, and see this door, you'd reach in, undo it, and it opens back here.
That way.
So you get the whole thing.
Big wide.
And it looks good on a new pickup truck, but Bugatti was doing it in 37. This is another Ventoux, and it's like a suicide door coupe. But here's one that's a little different. I have a 67 GTO. You'll see it in my house later if we open the garage door. But look at this, it's got ram air. This actually has a cold air goes right to the top of a downdraft carburetor, and that was in 1936. Are you enjoying this trip?
Yes, I'll say.
Now look at it. This is actually a Bugatti Royale Type 41 engine. Can you imagine this in a car?
Wow.
Now, we didn't sell many Bugatti Royales, 6 of them.
They built that for a car.
Built it for a car, but he couldn't sell many because that was the longest car Bugatti ever made, the biggest, the Royale.
Single overhead cam.
It's basically big 8-cylinder. And this particular engine, when he couldn't sell too many of these in cars. There's only so many Maharajas and Kings, and unfortunately it was like right at 1930. So the depression that hit the US, but it was hitting the whole world. So the French government was trying to stimulate production and also provide transportation, so they put out a request for companies like Bugatti to build rail cars, and not just rail cars, but with the motorized rail cars.
Yeah.
So he had these bunch of these engines that he had built for the Royale, and they put 4 of these motors in one rail car and maybe put a dummy car on each end, and that was the Bugatti train.
Wow.
And people loved running the Bugatti train. It would go up to 120 miles an hour with 4 of these engines, yeah.
Wow.
These are monsters, Bugatti Royale. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Would you love to get this in the shop, Ed, and tear it apart? I think it would be fun.
I noticed you got that dual intake manifold. 4 cylinders.
Each 4 for each.
Yeah. Sometimes they're 2 4-cylinders just put together.
Yep.
And sometimes the 4-cylinder is in the middle, and another cylinder, 4-cylinder is cut up in half and put on the ends.
Well, they did. There was a lot of theories.
Miller made them just two 4-cylinders together, and then a lot of other people, most others, a 4-cylinder in the middle, and another 4-cylinder cut in half and put on the ends.
Well, that's now I read.
Good either way.
It is. I read that Harry Miller made his camshafts in 2 pieces because his cam grinder wasn't big enough to do the whole thing. So they did whatever they needed to.
I'll be down.
And that's in Gabriel Voisin. He actually made a 42-cylinder airplane engine. I don't know if they ever used it, but yeah, these guys kind of really experimented.
Wow.
Well, we saw the ultimate barn find. Now we're going to see a car that actually went in a lake. And this is not just any Bugatti. This was driven and owned by René Dreyfus, the famous French racer. And
do you think they put it in the lake to hide it?
Well, I'm going to tell you the story. So here's what happened. René Dreyfus, like a lot of guys at the time, first they would drive their race cars. They had to drive their race cars actually to and from the race. They'd take off, like you guys up at the lakes would take your fenders off. They did the same thing on these road races. And Dreyfus was in Paris. He was already well known, and he was a gambler. And he lost his car. He bet his car and lost it. But the guy who won the bet, was a Swiss national. And he jumped in this car, drove it from Paris. He was going through Italy to get into Switzerland. And he got to the border near Lake Maggiore, Italy. And basically when he got there, they said, hey, welcome home, welcome to Switzerland. This is your car, guess what? You owe us taxes, you owe us licensing, you owe us value added, all this stuff, a big bill. And the guy says, I can't afford it, I don't have the money. He says, that's okay, you got X amount of time, 30 days to come back and get your car. Well, he never came back. So by law, they had to destroy the car. And Lake Maggiore is 170 feet deep, and so the 2 customs guys were going to push it in, and they both realized it's a Bugatti, and it was René Dreyfus's car. This is at least the story we hear. And so maybe we'll put chains on it, because you never know, we may want to pull this thing back out. So they put chains on this car and pushed it in. Well, it didn't take too long for the chains rusted out. The car went down, and so I think this went down head first, 170 feet. And when it hit to the bottom, it flopped over into the sand and silt. And that's why this side, the metal still exists. This side, the metal's gone. And what is great about this car, and Mr. Mullin will never have this restored, because all you really need is a serial number. You could create a new car out of parts.
Yeah, it's better this way.
This is this way, but also if you look at it, this is how this was. You can look at every wire, every piece, and see how Ettore Bugatti built his car. The rest of the story, 170 feet down, local divers, they had heard the story. Well, one of the diver's sons actually was killed in a knife fight or something, some kind of youth violence. And the local community of Lake Maggiore were upset and says, we need to create some kind of a group and get, help our kids and give them something to do. And so they said, where are we going to come up with the money? And someone said, well, why don't we pull up this old Bugatti? It might be worth something. So that's when they pulled up the Bugatti. they talked to one of the big auction companies, and the auction company said, hey, it's for a good cause. We will auction this for free, and if nobody buys it, we'll pay you $30-something thousand, you know, towards the fund.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Mullin found out, and he was the boy says, hey, I'd pay $30,000 for this.
Yeah.
Someone else found out though and wanted it, we think, so they could get the serial number and make a new Bugatti. I'm glad he got it, and it's here now. You can hear the humidifier behind us. They're trying to keep it controlled so that it doesn't waste away anymore.
Those headlights held up that well?
They held up pretty good, so they're probably nickel coated.
Oh.
You know, this was pre-chrome, so they would have been nickel. And yeah, I think nickel is less likely to rust through, but I'm not sure. Famous Bugatti aluminum cast race wheel that would have broke. And you notice that
At Muroc Dry Lake one time, I think it must have been Donnelly's son, had an accident with a Bugatti, and people were collecting the broken pieces of aluminum.
You know, in these races, these brakes would fade very quickly. You might get 2 or 3 pumps hits, and then they'll fade away.
Yeah.
And Bugatti always made, it was funny, this one, they're all cable-operated brakes.
Oh,
Which is
cable.
kind of, which is weird. Now, someone asked Ettore Bugatti, says, why cable? He goes, I make my cars to go, not to stop. That was his answer. But what he did, it made a lot of sense, is he cast this wheel with an integral brake drum. And I'm sure it had a steel liner, but when they changed tires,
that heat.
Yeah, pit stop, they take the whole tire, wheel, brake drum off, put a cool one on.
Oh, yeah.
And so at least they get another couple stops. Now, what I also have read is these guys that race these cars, they figured out to pretty much drift into the corners, not to use the brakes. You know, they use the sideways motion.
Wow.
But this is a interesting car. We call it Type 4344. Now, this would have been an inline 8-cylinder, but it was pre the Miller type with double overhead. You know, this is overhead cam, but it wasn't the hemispherical. But why they call this a Type 4344, it was originally built as a race car.
Yeah.
And then after it outlived its usefulness, it was sent to Fagoni, Falaschi, and they built this cute little roadster. So they never threw away chassis. You know, you didn't waste a good car.
Original race car.
This is a car that never was. Jean Bugatti actually was.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Alex mentioned it down front. And this is the buck to build a car. And the people at the design school,
the way they did it.
Yep. You'd hammer out your English wheel.
Wow.
And you'd fit it to a buck.
And they brought it over here.
This one they made here because
John
Bugatti.
It's a duplicate, a replica.
Yeah, this is a duplicate. John Bugatti actually died. He was killed in a car crash when he was testing the Type 57 tank, 1939. He was only 30 years old, and he died. And he had these plans. John Bugatti is the one who designed most of these cars, but he never finished what was going to be the Type 64. But what Mr. Mullin found was he got the plans, and he found the Type 57. He had the buck built, and then this is the car that actually was built from the buck. We call it the Bugatti that never was, the Type 64, because Jean was already dead. But look at the workmanship that the company did in Michigan. You can see the welds. You know.
Wait a minute. This was built in Michigan.
This one was, because it was never built in France. So they took the plans. They had the design school.
Such a beautiful job.
Yeah, design school built the buck. And if you look back here, Ed, you will see the seams. I can't believe, I do some TIG welding, but I can't believe, look at the weld seams. See these seams?
Wow.
Is that amazing or what?
That can't be tell.
You can't even tell, you just barely see that line, but what a beautiful job.
Oh my goodness. You know that Lago head on the
Talbot Lago?
Talbot. The guys used to, when the Chrysler came out with a push rod rock arm Hemi, you know, the Chryslers. They copied the R-Dun with the flathead Ford, which Duntov had made.
Zora Arcus Duntov.
And Duntov got the idea from Lago, evidently. It was a 6-cylinder with the long rocker on the jaw.
This Bugatti, you recognize that? That's elephant hide.
Elephant hide.
Elephant hide. Pretty amazing, isn't it?
Wow.
And this is a semi-profile that was built as a Bugatti body.
Boy, you have to know a lot today.
Well, I tell you what, there's so many things, and the challenge here is, like this car, this blue and cream car wasn't here the last time I was here. Every time I come in,
Something new.
yeah, because it has so many cars, they're moving all the time.
The Model T was actually an easier car to drive.
They were simple.
Rutty roads and springy steering and stuff. It was just right for the old roads. And
Well, a little later on, I've got a Model T. We see it tonight. If you want to go around the block in the Model T, you're welcome to.
I'll be
They're fun.
darned.
1926.
yeah,
And it's got its original motor, no water pump, no fuel pump, no oil
Oh,
pump,
that's
no
right.
nothing.
my friend John Assen and we'd go to school together, and we'd get to ride in a, by God, it was a 27T. And we'd all hang on the bumpers and the hangers going to school. I don't know how we didn't get arrested. And my job was to get there early, and I don't know if we were doing any good, and we'd crank it over.
Yeah, she'll start.
And get up on top with our foot and go down on the side.
Well, you got to be careful going down. You
And
always
one
want to blow
time,
up.
and one time,
Ford Dragster.
Kick on
threw
you.
me up.
This thing's she'll start in a crank without too big a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing.
Oh,
you
you know
want to sit in this?
Let's get a Makita.
All right.
Come on, I want to get a picture.
Hang off the fenders.
There you go. There you go. Just don't get yourself caught in this little sharp edge. There you go. I'm gonna run
Yeah.
up there. You guys want to walk up with us? We got to get some pictures.
I got video, but I'll give him a camera.
Let me get this. I'm gonna just close that door. Look at that. That's perfect. And you get the horn. That's the Model T horn.
Remember how to drive these?
Yeah.
Yeah? Could you do it if you had to?
Yeah.
Yeah?
There. Run to the Six volt. Oh, it's still up here. The battery just makes sure you start. I've never. Yeah, we got headlights. We got on my reverse pedal.
You see?
Oh yeah. These things are so low gear. I get it.